depending on the time you're watching this, because as you know, this is not a show about comics. This is about time traveling. We're doing physics here. I'm in Spain, and what time is it for you, Cecile, now?
At 8:04 a.m.
So 9 hours. So we're time
Yeah.
traveling from late in the afternoon to early morning.
You to the past. Good. Yeah.
So how's things? How's things for you? How's things in your? Well, first of all, with all of you, CECIL Castellucci, people, our amazing guest, genius creator, genius writer, in the other side of the time warp, as you can see. How are you doing? How's things in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's going better here, so that's exciting. Feeling hopeful about the future, but I'm in Los Angeles, so sorry, there's a garbage truck now outside. I'm feeling. I hope it's a garbage truck.
Maybe it's Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Be worried, behind you.
No,
with the knife. Go check.
No, it's a big truck for trees that's right outside. Anyway, whatever, doesn't matter. As you can still hear me, right? So it's no
absolutely
big
that's perfectly fine. Don't worry.
I'm in Los Angeles, so like the rest of the world, we're trying to figure out this whole pandemic thing, and right now we're the worst place on earth. So, just trying to stay at home, like everyone else, and keep a good attitude and stuff. So, but making comics.
Yeah, are you noticing any that it's getting better at all, or just, let's say it this way, since Trump lost,
yeah,
that helps?
Yeah, I feel hopeful with that. I feel like suddenly it feels like everything's ramping up for sort of good news down the line, like vaccines and all that. But right now Los Angeles is it's the worst place on earth right now. So
No.
so it,
No. check how they're doing in Brazil with that crazy president, the Brazilian Trump, if you want to call him.
But LA, anyway, we're things are we'll figure it out, but it's yeah, we'll figure it out. But I do feel like there's a silver lining, and I think all of us feel like that, now that vaccines are out there. And so I can't wait to travel again. That's that's my dream. I teach comics, hybrid comics, at the animation program in Denmark. And last year at this time I was in Denmark teaching, so I should be in Denmark now. But I taught in September from my house with a 9-hour time difference, and it's hard, so I'm looking forward to things moving, swimming slowly towards goodness. But anyway,
were you with Teddy in Denmark?
With who?
With Teddy Christensen?
Oh, he wasn't there when I was there, because the teachers always come. It's workshops, so they're always sort of separate. No, I wasn't. I was there by myself.
Yeah, next time you're in Denmark, we have to make sure that you meet with Teddy. He's an amazing man, an amazing artist. The comics habla así. The worst place is Petare, Caracas, Venezuela. There's not even a contest. Okay, you know why? You know what, guys? Enough. Let's just stop. We're going down the drain.
How about this? We're all the worst place right now.
Exactly. They say the global. We're all fucked. Okay, that's what you want to hear. We are all fucked until we have the vaccines. And we're free. So, going into that. Imagine my name is Victor Frankenstein. I'm a doctor. Nice to meet you. And this rotary pen is my syringe. So I'm just going to pop it into you.
I'm done.
Done. Pandemic is over. You're free. You can do whatever you want.
Well, that is the good news, is that, I think that one thing that we've all really learned is how important art is during this time. I'm looking at more movies and television and music and comics and books and everything. So I think that's I don't know how my creative stuff is going, but I am definitely sort of engaged, and I'm sure that, like all creators of all kinds of arts, even if my output isn't as much as I would like, I feel like I'm absorbing a lot that will eventually make its way into the work.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to ask. I have to this question. I've had two opposite answers, which is first, when this started, how difficult it was for you to work, and is it still difficult, or you've moved to the other side of the needle? You know, like you are overworking, and by the end of the day, you check and you're like, wait, did I work? Did I do this much? I never do this much. What's going on?
I would say that for me, it felt like working through molasses, so things were still moving forward. I was writing Batgirl, and a script that would take me a few days or a week would take me like 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks instead. So everything just sort of like was stretched out, and I definitely feel like maybe since November, since the election,
Since Trump lost, of course.
that I've started to sort of have a re-energized sort of feeling. I still feel like I'm writing through molasses and stuff, but yeah, I don't feel like my output is more, because I just feel like everything is taking longer than it usually does. And I don't know whether or not that has to do with, like, I'm going through the pandemic by myself. I live alone, and so it's harder to sometimes get motivated to do things, because you're like, nobody's bothering me about it. Why should I? So, yeah, but I definitely feel like I'm beginning to get my brain back, which is, once the vaccines were announced, and, we had a leadership change here, even though that was dramatic, yeah, and that didn't help with writing, like but I do feel now that, and I'm curious as to your other American guests if they feel the same, but I definitely feel like a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders. Just the constant worry about the state of my country, has been overwhelming.
I think that in a way, this is going to sound stupid, but I know you're going to understand because you're on Twitter. I think the lift of the shoulders of people, it wasn't when he lost the election. It was the day that Twitter said, "Fuck off, you're out."
True. It's true. It's so
That's when
true.
everything changed. That's when I said, "Oh, Facebook is banning him." Bah, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Somebody else is banning him. Bah, nobody cares. Like Twitter is banning him, not for a couple of days. No, he's out definitely. Then suddenly I saw every creator, every editor in comics, in any art form. To be honest, oof, oof.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. So I mean, it's a lot. But look, people have made art under more difficult circumstances, and they will continue to make art under more difficult circumstances than we have. And thank goodness for art. I mean, I have to say, the thesis of me and Jim Rugg's book, the Plain Janes, is art saves, and I really do believe that. And our work isn't finished. I mean, like, just because that guy's off Twitter doesn't mean that, like, But anyways, but yeah, but I think that's a good thing. Like, Jim and I, Plain Janes is about an all-girl guerrilla art group that makes art, and slowly through book 1, 2, and 3, it ends up becoming more and more sort of about activism. And and I feel like that I'm so glad that book is there, because I feel like it was a guiding star for, I mean, I got lots of emails over this past year just saying, thank goodness, because art save, so yeah, so
that's one of the books, and this is not bullshitting you because I don't have time to bullshit people, to be honest. But that's one of those books that I know is separated in my home. That from when my daughter, she's 6 now, when
Oh,
she's older. This is one of those books that I know is going to be on the shelf,
yeah.
right? What I'm doing with her, what we're doing with her now, is our weird way to do things with teaching her. We never tell her what to read. We put a pile,
Yeah. That's the best way to do it with kids, I think.
exactly, a pile in there, and it's like you go
Yeah.
and pick. Even with her, children's tales, they're not self. And I want to read, Daddy, Mommy, I want you to read me something, and we never tell her what to read. It's like go to the shelf and you pick.
Pick, yeah. I work with elementary school kids. I've been volunteering doing literacy for 20 years now with 2 teachers, and first to 4th grade. The grades change because whatever the teachers are teaching that year. And I do literacy, and one of the big things that I do is I do a fundraiser every year, and I donate books. These kids, they don't have books at home. A lot of them, some of them are have been homeless, living in hotels and stuff. And what I do is I pick a whole bunch of different books and I spread them out on the floor, and then I let them go shopping so that they can pick the book that they're attracted to.
Mhm.
Because I feel like it's a great thing to give a book to a kid, but it's a great thing for a kid to pick a book that speaks to their heart,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that that's how you make a reader.
Mhm.
That's how you make someone who falls in love with stories. And stories are my favorite thing. So that's why I volunteer, because I want sort of the love of because I feel like if you know how to read and if you are a reader, then no matter what happens in the world, like even right now, right? You're free. You can
Yeah.
do, you can travel anywhere. You can go to any time period. You can go to outer space. You can, it's the best. Reading is the best.
Absolutely, and they fall in love. Another thing that I love is that they fall in love with words through images.
Yeah.
They
Oh
start
yeah.
reading a tale. They see three images. They don't understand the words, and of course, the next second, my daughter is asking, "Daddy, what's that mean? Read it to me."
Yeah.
And I tell her, "No, you know what? Every paragraph, let's do the thing. I read one paragraph, you read the next."
Yeah. That's why I don't know if you know my book with Sarah Varon called Odd Duck.
Yeah.
So that's why we constructed that book so that a kid who didn't know how to read could read the story with the pictures.
Yeah.
But it could also be read aloud by a parent, but it was also a first chapter book. So a kid who just had learned how to read could read it themselves. So it's kind of, I call it a graduated book, like a book that a kid can sort of grow with
Mhm.
when they're first starting to read. Because I mean, I think it's important. I feel like I learned how to read mostly because of comics. I remember, this sounds so weird, but like I had a Peanuts pillowcase
Mhm.
that had word balloons on it, and the peanuts and different, things. And I remember trying to read my pillow, when I was little, 3,
Yeah.
and trying to read my pillow. And I remember once I got to kindergarten, one night I was going to bed and I could read my pillow, but it was because there were pictures and I liked looking at the Peanuts comics and stuff. And, my parents are French. So, so there was always comics around, Tintin and, Lucky Luke and,
Asterix, of course.
Asterix, of course. Yeah. Uh,
You just mentioned the three pillars of French comics.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's how I learned, to read.
That's the second part I was going to mention too, because I always defend, and I know you're going to agree, that comics should be taught from primary first year of primary, because it gives us, I will say it gives us a superpower as
I
readers,
think so. Yeah,
which is from the first second you understand how to read between the panels.
yeah,
Then you go to read a newspaper, to watch the news, anything, read a novel, and as readers, we never take anything for granted.
yeah.
We're taught by comics to look what's between the lines.
Yeah, I mean, and I also feel like, especially now, when we live in a world with, smartphones and visual stuff, that visual literacy is just as important as
Absolutely.
word literacy, And I feel like comics really help with that, So
And
that's
we also train to is the only art form. Like, let me know if you agree with me. That trains both sides of the brain at the same time.
I
You
would
know,
agree.
this
Yeah.
the image part. I'd probably say doing it wrong because of the camera being,
Yeah.
but you know, one side is the words processing, and the other side is the image processing. And comics is the only that makes you, because movies is a different thing. You know, they mix it, but comics is you have the image, you have the words, and you have to mix them in your brain, right?
Well, I don't know. Are you aware of the book that I did with Nate Powell? Which is, it's called The Gear of the Beasts and the Brilliant.
Haven't read that one. No.
So anyway, I got a
No,
lot.
no,
So
please go. I want people to know all your books here. Please go crazy. Go crazy.
The Year of the Beasts is it's a hybrid novel. So it alternates prose and comics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's alternating chapters, and you can read just the words and you get one story,
Mm-hmm.
and you can read just the comics and you get one story. But if you read them together, you get the whole story. So it's a little bit of a puzzle,
Yeah.
but you can enjoy it without the other one if you want.
Mm-hmm.
And you get you get a complete story. And that was something that I was trying to play with, that idea that we can separate these things out, because one of the things that I love most about comics that you can't do in prose is like when you're writing a novel is silence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, silence in comics is like silence in no other field, you know,
Yeah.
not even just a painting by itself. Sure, that's quiet, but it's not quiet the way that it's something that's telling you a story. And when you have words, you know, and I write novels as well, when you have words, you can say it was very quiet.
Yeah.
It was so quiet, but it's very loud in the way that the words are sort of loud.
Because you're hearing the words in your head.
Exactly. And so, and you're hearing the silence. If you
Exactly.
describe the wind, the gentle wind and the whatever. But with comics, you're like, blah, 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 blah. They're talking. And then you turn the page and it's just, you have to rest as a reader.
Yeah.
You have to settle with yourself, but the story is continuing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's just the best part about it.
I'm loving this conversation because you're reading my mind in most of my questions, because there's things that I always ask, and this is one of them. I
great.
always ask, especially writers, but also artists, why is silence so important to comics? You know, that moment when you go to the top of the hill,
Yep.
and suddenly, you know, I agree with you. I think you can only do this in comics. In other art forms, you have to go slowly down the slope. In comics, you can go to the top of the hill and suddenly, boom, it's full silence.
Yeah.
And get the reader like, oh shit, what's going on?
It really is just the best. Like, it's the best. And I mean, that's part of, you know, when I write my scripts, I overwrite them, you know, in terms of dialogue and in, you know, they're very wordy, because for me, I guess the dialogue is like that's my scaffolding, you know?
Yeah.
And then once I get the art back, a lot of the times it's like, okay, what can I throw out? You know, do I even need words here? You know,
Do you think the dialogue is your safety net as a writer?
Yeah, I think
while you're writing, and then you see the art and you are like, oh, I don't need the safety net, so take it off.
Yeah. Basically, what I think the script is for the artists that I collaborate with, and I've been very lucky with the amazing, amazing artists that I've gotten to collaborate with. And each one of them, it's, you know, different, you know. Mm-hmm. But what I've always felt is that the script is a scaffolding for the artists, so that they don't have to do all of the heavy lifting in terms of panel placement and you know, all of that pacing. And they can throw it out. If I say this is 5-panel page, but they want to do 9 panels, or they want to do 3 panels, it doesn't matter, because my job as the scriptwriter is to get them to understand the mood and the tone and the feeling and the pace and the world. And then but I don't want to make them have to think about everything. So it's a springboard. It's a safety net for them, so they don't have to do all of the heavy lifting. and then they, you know, they propose what that interpretation is back to me. I always usually write at the beginning of working with a new artist, you know, or whatever you want, you know, here's what I think, or whatever you want. But I also, you know, when I'm doing a creator-owned project, not when I'm doing a DC project, but or a licensed project, but when I'm doing a creator-owned project, I always ask the artist as well, like, what kind of script do you prefer? You know, so like for Jim Rugg, we had started doing, because when we did Plain Janes, it was at DC Comics, so we were required to do full script.
Yeah.
So I continued to do full script when we did our new third book. But basically, he just does whatever he wants. It's just the scaffolding.
Yeah.
And that's great, because when I was first writing, you know, Plain Janes was my first comic, I didn't know how to move from prose, from word, you know, novels to comics. And so one day I called him up crying, you know, and I was like, I don't know, I feel claustrophobic inside of the panel. I don't know how to move to the next, you know, thing. Because I was so used to writing sentences where there was lots of actions, you know, and I was crying, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And Jim gave me the best advice ever. He was like, Cecil, just write whatever crazy shit you want on the page. I'm your swim buddy, and I'll figure it out. Like, we're a team. And I was like, oh, right, collaboration, you know? Yes. And that's what I've taken with me to all my other projects. So, for example, Nate Powell and Jose Pimenta, who I did Soupy Leaves Home with, I did open script for them. So it would be page 1, and then I would write action and dialogue, and then they broke it down the way that they wanted. And that was, you know, sort of a conversation that we had, you know, like, what are you in the mood for, you know, in terms of that.
But that's always the advice I give to new writers, you know, when they're trying to write, like, oh, I don't know how to solve this in this complex way because I want to manipulate the language of comics and all that. Like, stop. First, now learn how to walk, and then you learn how to run. Or speed without, you know, speed without control is nothing.
Yeah.
Let it flow. You learn, but let it flow. This is comics, as you said. There's another person on the other side who's gonna grab it, and give it new meaning. And when you get it back, you're gonna see, like, oh, so this is how it works, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's why I am not very precious about throwing out my dialogue, you know, because the meaning changes or deepens when, you know, when I get it back. And I mean, I have to say I say that, but it's a little bit different. Not with Shade the Changing Girl, not with Female Furies, but like when you're doing an, you know, like Batgirl, you know, in universe, that one is a little different because you have to service a different beast, I guess, you know. Universe. So that's a little, I say this and I'm talking mostly about the creator owned stuff.
Absolutely,
even I do the same thing with, you know, when I'm doing licensed work, you know, with Batgirl, like, you know, definitely throw out a lot of the words and stuff, but then you're adjusting for the character's voice, or for what, you know, what maybe the Batman comic needs Batgirl to say in her book for that book, or, you know, whatever. And so that's a slightly different. And it's at such a quicker pace that there's a little bit less time for, you know, kind of like you know, let's feel how this, like, you know, is going to be, because it's got to come out, you know.
It's a different animal, but at the same time, don't you think that when you and the writer meld in that way, you know, you are not the artist and the writer anymore. I always say that when that happens, like for example with you and Jim Rugg, there's not a writer and an artist anymore. You create a third entity who's the real creator of the comic.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah. And I definitely felt like that with some of the artists that I worked with on Batgirl, you know, as well. Robbie Rodriguez, I think when we did issue 47, which was the response to the Killing Joke in the Joker War, you know, for me, that was, you know, that little team up of me and him, that was like a real thing. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. this is what, when you know that you really have bonded with an artist, and made that third entity,
Yeah.
is that I had accidentally misnumbered my pages for issue 48, I think. And I I thought I'd written 20 pages of comics, but I'd actually written 21 because I cleverly did 2-page 16s,
Yeah.
and nobody noticed, we know none of us.
That happens a lot more often than you think.
So I was like feeling really good because I'd been really struggling. Like I was like, I don't have enough pages. Then suddenly I had enough pages to do it. I was like, wow, I'm a genius. This is amazing, Then I get this text from Robbie. And Robbie's like, Cecil, I think there's 2-page 16s. And I was like, what? No. And then I was like, oh shit. And there was important stuff on both of those pages. And him and I just had a very quick text conversation, and about what was essential, what wasn't essential, and he said, okay, I think I've got a plan. And he managed to get everything that I needed in that one, like we refigured the 2 pages. And you can only really do that on the fly that quickly when you and the artist really get what you're trying to do together, and that you're really in a collaboration. And so that was a real joy. I would say right now, I got to do a short story with in Batgirl 50 with Marguerite Sauvage, and now we're doing a little Oracle story. She's the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, doing that. I mean, basically every single artist I've worked with is like that.
And also, Marguerite is one of the most kind and amazing human beings in the whole universe.
Yeah. And she lives in my hometown of Montreal. So, so whenever I go back, so I just always want to work with her because A, I get to speak French, and B, I get to, have like
let's be honest here. You get to you both together make fun of Yannick.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is what we do. It's like we get together to make fun of Yannick Paquette. This is what we do.
So
we all love Yannick. It's a joke. It's a joke, people. Before you thinking, I'm serious. It's a joke.
No, I know. But didn't he leave Montreal? I feel like I just read that he did.
Yannick, yeah, he lives in Montreal.
Yeah. No, I thought he left. Did he leave?
Yeah.
Okay.
If Yannick leaves Montreal, he dies. He loses all his blood and dies. No.
I met him on the airplane once, and I was like, "Hey, I'm from Montreal too," and then that was it. But anyway, and I definitely felt like that. That I'm talking about that with the license, in universe, whatever. Yep. But with the artists that I like, but with Shade, the Changing Girl, and with Marley Zarconi, and Female Furies with Adriana Mello, it was the same thing. I mean, me and Marley would, we were such a unit that when she was inking, we would Zoom, and I would have a glass of wine, and we would just talk while she was inking, because I didn't want her. She was doing so. It was, art is hard, and I didn't want her to be alone, and so I would.
Nice.
But that was like when I met Marley. It was like meeting my sister, my soul sister, or something. Like it was, it was really great, and that was. Writing panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, but you're dealing with a character who's using madness as, so oftentimes it would be, like my panel 1 and panel 2 would be like Shade walking into her own mouth or something, and that's not what I wrote, but I would suggest things, like something, whatever. And then Marley would take it to that next level. And her and I would just constantly be talking. We had and this is my new thing that I love doing, is I make Pinterest boards for all the artists that I work with now. So that we have a shared sort of visual vocabulary. And that started with Shade. Me and Marley had a joint Pinterest I had suggested, where anytime we saw an image that we thought looked like madness, we would put it in this Pinterest so that her and I had sort of a shared thing. And if there was anything, I could always point. I'd be like, oh, remember that this image like this, or she could pull from that, and that way we had a shared sort of visual vocabulary. But now I do it for everything, like for settings, for characters, for for Barbara Gordon costumes, and it's just amazing. Like Pinterest is the best for working with an artist, because then you can kind of explain the unexplainable to the artist that you're working with, and they don't do exactly that. But they're like, oh, okay, I get it, and then
it's not even do this. It's you open the door for their mind to explode, right?
For their mind to see your mind, because my mind is visual mind, so I can't draw it for them to say this is what I mean. So then they kind of have an idea. It's great. Yeah.
And have you ever, based on that trust with the artist, as you were mentioning, with Marguerite or with Robbie or with Marley or with Adriana or any other, just not cover, just do a panel and say, I'm not going to give you any cues, just go crazy.
I mean,
because you trust them so much, you just say, I know what you're going to do, so I just let you do
it. Do I ever do? I mean, yes, of course I do that. I mean, sometimes so I'll just write that in the script. I don't necessarily give them like, this is what you have to do. I'm not that. I'm not that.
I'm not even that. I'm not even that. No. I'm not calling you tyrannical. Of course. No, it was the other way around. I was just saying that sometimes you're writing a script and suddenly you think, well, this is for Robbie. He's going to know what I mean. And you just do it in 3 words and let him go with it.
Absolutely. That's the great thing. And that's why I like working with artists that I've worked with before. When you've bonded with them in that way, it's like, that's why it's like, I mean, even though it was just a small thing in 50, I had done the Milk War comic for Shade with Mirka Andolfo. And so it was great to work with her again. Obviously we haven't done like a long thing or anything like that, but like with Marguerite, it's like, or with Marley or Jim, I can just say, oh, Jim's gonna love this. Oh, he's gonna, or like, Marguerite's gonna knock this part out of the park, or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. You tailor the way that you're writing to the artist that you're working with. That's why it's heartbreaking when you do a project and it doesn't click in that in that way, because it's just because the joy of comics is the collaboration.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's my favorite part of it, because you really feel like you're making art together. And so, and I don't have any complaints about any artist that I've worked with that I haven't like become best friends with. I love them all. I'd work with them all again in a half a second. But there's something really special when the chemistry is there, and you just know that like the next time you work together, you can take that chemistry to the next level.
And how much do you like to challenge them? I mean, for example, Jim doesn't. It's an example I'm making up right now. Okay, Jim doesn't like to draw cars, so I'm going to make him draw cars. He's going to love to hate me, because in that scene it works and he's going to have fun. Do you like to challenge them to do things they don't like, or you're like, no?
Ask them what they don't like to draw. I've never thought of that, so I've never thought of doing that. But I'm sure that I've pissed all of them off at some point by being like, and there's 1 million people in the crowd, there's 12 million buildings and 5 million explosions. I am trying to think about that a little more now. Like I just wrote a scene for this new project that I'm working on, this creator-owned project, and I was like, it's a cabinet meeting and there's lots of, and then I was like, okay, 4 cabinet members, just don't make it 12, make it 4, that way, she doesn't have to draw that many, people. So I'm trying to be more conscious about that.
No, that's like the famous anecdote in a convention many years ago, when a writer is in a panel. he doesn't know the artist is there. So he's telling, oh, in the next issue, we're going to have an amazing scene where 50 people are fighting and blah, blah, blah. And please don't tell the artist because, it's a surprise for him. I know he's going to love it. And the artist is is sitting there. He just gets up and said, hi, I am your artist and you're a fucking son of a bitch and I'm going to kill you.
That's amazing. That's really funny. I guess that is kind of the hard part. Oh, I'm having an echo. Should I put my hold on.
I'm hearing you without any problems.
Oh, okay. I'm hearing a weird echo.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that's the hard part, is that especially when you're doing things that are so big, right? You want to go like there's 12 spaceships and there's because it looks cool. But I think that being more economical is a nicer way. And look, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm sure I fuck up. I'm sure that sometimes the artist is like, CECIL, and I apologize to all of you. I really sorry.
But you also know artists that you probably ask for, for a spaceship so they don't want to kill you, and suddenly the artist comes back with 12 spaceships.
Exactly.
But if you do it the other way and you ask for 12, they're probably going to put 4 and say, don't ask me for more, I'm going to kill you. Yeah. So better to let them go crazy on their own, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah, and like I said, I just have to really say that I just feel so lucky when I think about all the amazing artists that I've gotten to collaborate with and make stories with. I just feel so lucky. And I can't wait to meet all the new artists that I'm going to fall in love with to work with as well, down the line. So, yeah.
Let me go with what people say here, and then we come back to our question.
I saw that Fletch was on there. So, hi, Fletch.
Yes. Let's go. So, the Comics Habla Así. Hello, David and CECIL. Hello. Paula Ventimiglia. Hello. The Comics Habla Así says Castellucci is an institution in comics.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I am not paying you, but I should pay you guys $10 every time you say something like that. Just saying. Hashtag let's saying. Comic Crack, good morning, everybody. Fletcher Chufong. Hello, David and CECIL. Much love to you both. Mwah! Love you, my friend. Love you. Biggest mistake ever in comics. What's happening with you and DC Comics? They fucked up. And I'm going to say it because I don't work for them.
Fletch is the best.
Fletch is the best. We know. And in capital letters, size 600 per letter. Fletch is the best.
He knows I love him.
Yeah. I think he knew, and he knows we all love him. And we can't wait for somebody else in this industry. And you guys are taking too long to snatch him. He's too good for comics. We can't lose people like Fletcher. Anyway, Comic Crack, it's not over yet. You have to keep the pressure on Biden. He's no different than other politicians. How's the stimulus check going?
Oh, I just got it
for 5 days.
I just got my $600.
I'm sorry, Comic Crack. I'm sorry. And please, 5 days. 5 days. 5 days. And they have regular press conferences. He doesn't sound crazy. For me, that's enough to start. I'm sorry. Let me see. Pedro de Mercader. See, we wanted to talk about female Furies, so thank you, Pedro, for asking. How was the process for female Furies? Did you feel intimidated by making a kinda sequel to Mr. Miracle? I love that one.
Well, I kind of feel like it was a prequel to Mr. Miracle because my story is about Scott and Barda meeting, and and obviously Tom King's is about them and their relationship.
It's the origins, Pedro. It's the origins.
It's the origins. But it was intimidating. That project came about because I was looking for something to do after Shade, and I wasn't on the lists for the DC universe. I think the editors just thought, oh, she's an indie comic person.
It's funny that sometimes editor and you are going to tell me you agree because I know you've interest that sometimes editors, when you were doing Vertigo or
Yeah,
or the J.R. Way universe, to say it that way, they
yeah,
think automatically for whatever reason they think, oh, she's not going to be interested in this. Like,
yeah.
just ask.
So I mean, the joke is that every year since the Plain Janes, which came out in 2007, 2008, uh, or a little bit after that, like
Yeah.
whenever I saw Dan DiDio at a Comic Con, I would go up to him and be like, "My name is Cecil Castellucci, and I would like to be in the DC universe." He'd be like, and
Dan could be Dan.
wander away, and so anyway, so nothing ever happened, and then I went in to his office. I just happened to be in the building, and his lovely assistant was like, "Oh, do you want to say hello?" And I was like, "Sure." And I had my DC. I had Xeroxed characters in the DC encyclopedia that I thought I could reboot the way that I had done with Shade. So I came in and I had all these characters and obscure ones and I was like, what about this one? What about this? Maybe I could do this. And he was like, oh, Jeff Lemire's doing that one. And oh, Scott Snyder's doing that one. Oh, Tom King is doing that. Like all the boys had taken everything. And I was like, oh, and he was telling me about them. And I love all those boys. So I'm not saying anything bad about those boys. But I was like, oh, and then he was saying, oh, this one's going to be like this and this one's going to be like this. And they were all very boy heavy,
Yeah.
I was like, ugh, where's your Handmaid's Tale? Because, he was like, this one will be like Breaking Bad and this one will be like, whatever. And I was like, where's your Handmaid's Tale? And he was like, oh, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then he pulled out the encyclopedia, pointed to the female Furies and was like, if you can crack that, then we can have a conversation.
Hmm.
I had purposely not Xeroxed the female Furies because I thought, well, Tom King has been doing Mr. Miracle. Why would I wouldn't,
Yeah.
that's off the table, like I'm not allowed, or allowed. And so then I was like, okay, well, what, I'm gonna take that and run. And so I read the whole thing. And if you read my female Furies and you read Tom's Mr. Miracle, mine is very much like you could slip it right into Jack Kirby's omnibus and me and Adriana's book, and it would fit right in because I pulled everything, like everything in me and Adriana's story comes directly from the New Gods. Like it comes from like every single like panels that I was like, oh, this one panel in Mr. Miracle number 8, I'm going to pull this out, or this panel in I'm blanking on everything right now. It's early. I haven't had coffee. The Beautiful People or whatever. I'm going to pull this panel out, or and so which Tom didn't do. Tom sort of spun it off into his own his bubble world. So I don't think I think of them as you can read them complementary together. You could read my book and then have it naturally flow into Tom's book, but they are separate, and they my book really more sort of is an enhancement of Kirby's of Kirby's whole New Gods world.
It's fun that Dan was able to think, Tom and Mitch's thing is its own thing, and there's a space in there, to build from Jack's legacy, right?
Yeah, and I'm very lucky too because to write for those of you who don't know, the Female Furies that I did with Adriana Mello, which is not in the DCU, it's in its own bubble thing as well.
Yeah.
Is the Me Too movement on Apocalypse. So it's a feminist awakening of Big Barda and the Female Furies, and sort of recognizing that their world is really fucked up, and the patriarchy within it. Yeah. And I did pull. So there's a character in our book called Aurelia who is in Mr. Miracle number 8, she is the reason why Scott and Barda meet in Kirby's book. And so what I did was I took that one sort of moment
Mm-hmm.
and I exploded that out because of what happens to that character in that one issue,
Mm-hmm.
which I felt was a good sort of place to sort of crack open. And when you read Kirby, I think what you find is that he leaves a lot of the story in the gutters,
Yes.
and so there are sort of cracks and places for you to go. So anyway, it was a real joy. I mean, it was hard. It's not easy to write a Me Too book, especially when as women. I don't know a single woman who hasn't experienced some sort of bullshit in some way. So, but I think me and Adriana felt very called to do it, and we felt like it was very important.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of that book. But it's a hard read. I think one of the things is like Mr. Miracle is like it's a hard read, but it's you kind of feel for him, and
Yeah,
there's like
it's comforting while female Furies doesn't pull any punches. That's my view of them, comparing one to the other.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a warm bath to
Yeah.
sink into. It's like, oh dear God, but like in a good way that makes you think, So, anyways,
Yeah, but how much did you learn about yourself writing that book? If you say nothing, I leave now.
I mean, how much did I learn? I mean, like in terms of what? I mean,
in terms of, let me say it this way: many times when I write something, I don't realize what I'm thinking about what I write until I read it, until it's published, and I say like,
right.
This is me. So this is what I was thinking and what I put in on the page. Until you get some distance with yourself and start realizing the person who wrote that, why did he do it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had shit happen, and I've been in an abusive relationship, and I think that giving voice to that about not being believed and stuff was powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the biggest revelation was Granny Goodness, because Granny is such a terrible person, and I think it would have been easy to make her just sort of a caricature of a sort of like the way that she usually is depicted, like, and I think that she was one of the most it was surprising at how satisfying it was to give her voice for what her experience was, which was, being the only woman in her group, with Darkseid, and then cultivating new women, but she had a different feminist experience than they did, and I think that giving her sort of that backstory and depth was what I learned about, was how complex all of these issues are. I mean, of course, that they're complex, but then to really sort of like give heart to someone who's so terrible, and I felt sorry for her. Like, she's the character that I felt the sorriest for, because she suffered from that systemic sexism and the patriarchy in a way that what she had to do to survive harmed her and what made her unable to have kindness towards other people's experiences. And that's tragic, And so I think that's, that was what I learned, was how to look at, I mean, I already knew this, but like it sort of re-emphasized to look at like, well, what's the deeper thing that's going on here, So
yeah, that's the other thing I was going to tell you. That did you think that did she have any choice, or she had to become what she become to survive?
I think she had to become what she became in order to survive. And quite honestly, I think the reason why, I mean, I will die on this hill. I think she's more powerful than Darkseid, but I think that Darkseid kept her close to manage her and
Mhm.
to keep her in her place,
Yeah.
so that and
Make her feel inferior, right?
yeah,
So she didn't realize I am more powerful than you. I'm going to sorry, I'm going to
exactly.
kill you. I'm going to take you out of the equation, right?
So and that's what I think, and I think that that's like a typical thing. No offense to all the gentlemen, but I think that the patriarchy, has done that a lot, squashed women's potential.
It's no offense. It's not offense. It's the reality. That's
So
that's our side of the of history.
so I think that that's what I think in order for her to survive and keep her place, she had to do certain things,
Mhm.
and she had to let go. She had to harden herself in a way. And for me, it's that she becomes you know, the mother, the orphanage, that they give her that job. That to me was that to me was just like, what? And then they're going to make her the mother? Why? That was the moment that cracked. And
Mhm.
there's no way I felt that there wasn't some sort of fucked up relationship between Darkseid and her that was much more intimate than there's like one moment in the book that you know where Darkseid basically is like leaning his head on her bosom like a child, sort of being weak in front of her. And I feel like that was a really real moment as well, that's what their intimacy is that he's vulnerable with her in a way that he's not vulnerable with anyone else, and that's why he treats her so terribly,
And also, as you said, she's forced to survive to do what she does. Those moments are probably used also by Darkseid. So she feels, oh, she got
exactly.
a things I need her, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Darkseid is using her also
Of
in
course.
is
Yeah, of
using her
course.
feelings and her emotions to his benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. So that's what I learned. I loved writing female Furies, but it was hard. I cried a lot while I wrote it. Like there were times where I'd be like writing something, I'd be like, oh, this is really hard, because you're sort of like staring at the sun in terms of like how messed up everything, like the light is shining on everything, it's like no corners, no shadows. So but I'm very proud of that book, and I really hope that more people read it. I feel like because it's a hard read, I think a lot of people kind of have put it to the side and so I'll get to it at some point. And I really wish that people would sort of get to know it, because I think it's important, and I think it's important that DC let us do it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Pedro Mercader also asked, how was it to reimagine Shade? Did you have the Milligan? Did you take Milligan's work into consideration? Did Gerard Way as young animal editor was him very involved? So I'm retranslating while while I'm
Yeah.
reading.
Um, it was amazing to work with Shade. The character was incredible. Basically, when so Gerard had come up with the idea that Shade was a 16-year-old girl who was the biggest bully in her school. And
Mhm.
when I had my interview with Shelley Bond and Gerard to see whether or not I was going to be the person to write it, I sat down and I said, I think it's too human centric if Shade is like Rack, a meta who is human. I said, I think Loma should be a bird, and she's a bird inside of a human's body. And that I think was the moment where Gerard and I became like super best friends, like because he's like, oh my God, you're right, it's a bird. But I used to be in a band, and Gerard was in a band, and so I think him and I have this sort of real feeling that comics is like rock and roll, is like making music, because you're collaborating with other people. It's the closest that I've ever gotten, having not been in a band for many years now, to being in a band again, writing
Yeah.
comics. And so he was involved, as in I would float ideas past him, and I'd go over to his house for tea every once in a while. But basically, he was just like, whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. And to answer the Milligan question, yes, absolutely. I as soon as I got the gig, like they were like, okay, Gerard was like, you're going to do it. I read the Ditko run of Shade, the original Shade, The Changing Man, and I read every single issue of Peter Milligan's brilliant run. And when you read me and Marley's Shade, what you can see is that I pulled from both Ditko and Milligan's run, and I like to think of them as complementary. I mean, I guess that's what I did with Female Furies too, right? Like, you can read Shade the Changing Girl as a sequel to Milligan's run. But one thing that I was really interested in was that it felt like Milligan had staked out the geography of darkness for Rack Shade, with murder and, sort of psychopathy and the darkness of the human psyche and all of that. And he mined that very, very well. And so I decided that I wanted to stake a different geographical land for me and Marley's Shade, for Loma. So I decided to stake the landscape of the heart and of the light, the goodness of the human experience, just so that we would have, that even if I would, step on Rack's toes, and if you've read Shade the Changing Woman, you know what I did. So there you go. That it was separate, that he had his space and that I had my space. But if you read, one thing I wanted to make sure was that if you read Shade the Changing Man, the Ditko version or the Milligan version, you would, that Shade the Changing Girl and Woman would enhance your experience of those readings, that it wouldn't, that you would get some inside jokes that maybe some other people wouldn't get, but your experience wouldn't be, it wouldn't throw out anything that you loved. It would only add to what you loved. And if you had never read any Shade, it wouldn't matter because we were our own thing. But
yeah,
Shade,
go please.
No, yeah.
That's amazing, that your perspective with that, and also with Female Furies, because you're taking your own space, but at the same time you're working. So it also fits. If you want to look at it as a separate thing, it works. If you want to look at it as a complementary thing, as part of the universe of those characters, it also works. And Female Furies is the same. It can live as part or a prequel, as you said, or the origins, or Tom's and Mitch's. I can also work as part of Kirby, and can also work as a continuation of Kirby's legacy. I mean, and also as its own thing, as its own bubble, right?
Absolutely. And I feel like that's the job of the writer. The job of the writer is to do their fucking homework. And like, I mean, look, I even do that with Batgirl, and I see Emanuela on there. Hi, Emanuela. We got to do Batgirl 50 together, and I can't wait to work with you again one day. But I do that with Batgirl as well. Batgirl 50 is a great example. The legacy of Batgirl, when she first came out, she became a congresswoman, where she goes to Washington, D.C., and she, becomes like the youngest. That's a big deal for her. And so I really wanted to leave Batgirl with this, this openness of her trying to figure out in what ways she could be a hero that is not just a vigilante, right? Which she has already done with being Oracle, with being congressperson, and so cracking that open, and that comes from her legacy. You can't get there if you don't do your homework and read what other people did with the character. You look at Jason Bard, who she was having a love affair with in Batgirl. He is her first great boyfriend that he had, that she had in her beginning of her character. He was that like respected her and her career, and also had his own relationship with Batgirl, even though he didn't know that they were the same, supported her, but believed she was a feminist. And he was a great guy, you know? So when you're given the direction, like, okay, well, this is going to be the boy, because Nightwing doesn't know who he is because he's been shot in the brain, and you know, that's off the table, and you know, all the men are off the table. So we got Jason Bard. Go. How do you make somebody who she threw off a building become her love? Well, you go back to the main reason why he was introduced into the character, and you try to find the good things that are probably in the fabric of that character, you know, because you're building. So so that's what I always do, even if it's, you know, even if I'm not spinning it off and reinventing a character in my own way. You know, I'm trying to look at the legacy of the character and to sort of flesh that character out in that bit. So.
Mm-hmm. Who's Barbara Gordon for you? It's what does she mean as a character in terms of female characters in comics?
Wait, what? I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Don't worry. I said, what does Barbara Gordon mean to you, and what do you think she means as a female character in comics?
Oh, Barbara Gordon. Well, first of all, I think she is the most resilient character, the most resilient bat that there is. She is so smart and has such a big heart, and is able to always ask, how can I be of service to the community? How can I be of service? And that goes like, you know, if she wasn't Batgirl, she'd be a librarian. And just like at the beginning of this conversation, that's being a superhero. Being a librarian is being a superhero, yeah. You know? And, you know, and her willingness to, you know, she's like one of the first characters, even when she first started, you know, like in the 70s, she goes on a computer date. You know, she's always using computers and stuff. So she's not afraid of new technologies and trying new technologies and sort of figuring out what that is. And, you know, and obviously when the Joker, you know, shot her, she didn't, of course she wallowed and was upset, but, you know, and had to do her recovery, but she goes to therapy, figures it out. And she like, she says, well, okay, well, what can I do now? How can I use my, so for me, she is such a flexible character. She's so open. And when she became a congresswoman, yeah. Okay, how can I help in this way? So she's so flexible. She is the ultimate hero because she never stops figuring out how to be a hero. And she's not dependent on her fists or her brawn or violence of any kind in order to be helpful. And I think that makes her magnificent and very important.
Mm-hmm. That was the second part of the question. Do you think she should have stayed as Oracle? That it was a mistake to bring her legs back?
You know, I mean, I can't really answer that question because I inherited her, you know, as she was with the implant. And so yeah. I have to think of her in that way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's something that I definitely tried to put in my Batgirl run, was that she's not, and especially in that Joker 47, when she sort of, you know, digs out her, spoiler alert, implant, so that she has control over her body and not the Joker.
Yeah.
Was that for her, in my mind, she knows one day her implant is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And she's organized her life so that it doesn't matter if she's in the chair or not. She can fight from the floor or with her brain,
yeah.
or with her legs. Like yeah. She can do it all, you know? So yeah, I mean, I think that Oracle was a great reinvention of that character, mm-hmm. and it gave her own agency in a different way than putting the implant back into her. But now that she does have the implant, that's what she has. That's yeah. the situation. my job, I felt, was to make it clear that she's okay with with whatever happens. That like if her implant fails and she goes back in the chair, it's not, she knows how to do that, and it's not a tragedy for her. It's it's a cycle of life for her, and and that she knows how to do that.
I know. I love this answer because you see that as I saw it in the beginning when there was that controversy about her, being able to walk again, and it said that's an evolution of the character. That depends on how you tell the story. She's conscious about what happened to her, and she's conscious it can happen again, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Drink and Draw Costa Rica says, hey, happy morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, Mrs. Castellucci. You're an awesome inspiration to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Most Fun is Entertainment, which we know is colorist Jerome Cox, says, this is great. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Jerome, and thank you for coming. And then I don't know why some questions are repeated here. Henry Baraja says, the best Batgirl writer ever.
Hi, Henry. Thank you.
Victor Q, hi from Colombia, Cecil.
Hi, Colombia.
Emanuela says, hi, Cecil. Me too. Okay.
Can't wait to work. Good. Yes.
You gotta do it. You gotta do it, Emanuela. Just you cannot take it back now. You gotta do it. So
I'm sure it'll happen one day.
Oh, absolutely. What do you think is the most unique thing about comics and its language, about the comics storytelling that no other art has?
Well, I think the silence, like we were talking about before. I mean, I think that's the most unique thing. And I mean, I feel like we covered it. I feel like it's the silence and the quiet, and for me, the collaboration. The fact that you're working, together with an artist, and I love doing the license work, but it's so much more satisfying when you have the time to really sort of play with the artist and sort of slowly come up with the world. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's hard because I feel like when you're making comics, like the writer is the big bang, right? Like you're the big bang, and then you spew out all the materials that other people are going to do, and there's so much trust in that collaboration, and they make the artist makes the planets and the sun and the the moons and all that, and then the colorist brings in the color, and then the letters. It's a real group effort. So I think that's what makes it really unique, because it's a group effort, but it's not like a film where it's hundreds and hundreds of people. It's a very tight, intimate group, which is, I think, why Gerard and I sort of feel like it's like being in a band.
And also there's another big advantage about not having any budget limitations, right?
Yes, except for my 12 spaceships that I want.
That's not a budget limitation. That's risking the artist going to your house and kill you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Go, please.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I think we've covered everything with that answer. The silence, the right brain, left brain, the literacy, the visual literacy. I mean, I think that's what's great about comics.
Okay, I was gonna go with Einstein and comics and the theory of relativity, but if you feel that's the thing. Have you seen any of my videos and my theory about that?
No, what is it?
Okay, let me see if you agree with me. If you don't, again, this is cursing aloud, and you can tell me shut the fuck up and that kind of things.
Okay.
I think that comics is the only art form that can defy Einstein's theory of relativity, and let me explain why. In any other art form, as Einstein would say, there's something called the arrow of time.
Okay,
the arrow of time in movies, in theater, in novels, etc. It just goes forward.
You're 100% right.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally agree with you.
And in comics, as I was going to say, you can jump back, you can go forward, you can stop time, as you said, silence. I can take 3 pages. and
Yeah.
completely stop time, and
Yeah.
I can move around in any other way, and it feels natural. In any other iPhone, it just feels something is off.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
That's why I always say there's a lot of unique things about comics, but that one is the thing that I think, as a language, is the only comics have it. I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm 100% with you.
Okay, thank you. That's good. It has to happen sometime. Now, and all that can say, how much do you like to, as a writer, how much do you like to play with the format? And I mean, do you like to be? Let me say it this way: there's the writers who go, "Oh, I am all about the destination. This is my structure. This is what I do." Another writers tell me, it's about the journey. It's about playing with the form. It's about maybe I will change my mind in the middle of a story and do something different to what I have planned. I just let it flow. How is it
Oh,
for you?
that's what I do. I mean, it's hard. Like when you do a pitch for, for like a creator owned, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then you start writing. I mean, this is how I feel with any writing, that's okay, fine. That's what I have to do to like sort of get it out the door and, have someone say, okay, we're going to do this. But then, once you actually get into the writing, it is about playing with it. I'm doing, I think Karen mentioned it, but I'm not sure. But I'm so I don't think I'm saying anything, really. It's not really announced yet. But I'm doing something with Karen Berger. I'm very excited about it, and I'm working on it right now. And I am really trying to sort of I have the story that that we agreed on, and that's the story that I'm still doing. And now I'm trying to play with the form and to see really how I can make some sort of interesting, subtle things work that you can only do with comics, and because otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of just? I mean, look, I like having like two characters sitting around talking. That's great, but what's the point in comics to do that? Like, and I think I have to say that I think Marley Zarconi really helped me to sort of get to that next level with comics, because writing shade and writing a superhero whose power is madness allows you to play with the form in a way automatically, because madness is happening, and
Mhm.
so you can put there's no rules to madness, and so you can kind of push the page. And so now it's kind of thinking about trying to how do you best do the form, but it's a craft, right? You like the interesting thing with the Plain Janes, right, was Jim Rugg and I, did our first Plain Janes in 2006, and then a year and a half ago we did book 3, right? Well, that's 12 years later.
Yeah.
So suddenly Jim and I, who had been doing many comics between then, that was my first comic. Now all of a sudden I was like, I had to mimic the way that I wrote back then, but I'm a different writer. I'm
Yeah.
a better writer, because I've had practice and because I understand the form more. And so there are things that I looked at in, the Plain Janes, and I'm like, God, I would never do that now. But I had to match it, and Jim, it was the same thing. He's a much better artist now, and so it was a really fascinating lesson, a gift, to be able to go back to have to match a naive early version of the way that you come up with story, and to bring what you know now, but to also make it match what you knew then, what you knew and didn't know then. And so that was a gift. But of course, if I restarted the Plain Janes now, I would write it in a totally different way. And I think you can see it in book 3. There's this one scene where Jane goes to France, and she goes to the museum, and she walks through the museum, and she walks through the paintings. So she walks through a Manet, she walks through I'm forgetting all the artists that we did. Van Gogh. She walks through them, and it's her in that world. And there was also this one thing where she's like walking in her town, and she looks up, and it's like the Starry Night from Van Gogh. And I didn't think to do that in the first book, but but if I had done the first book now, I would have done more things like that, because the Plain Janes is about making art and about falling in love with art and walking through art. And so we did it very sparingly, because it wouldn't have made sense to do the whole book like that, because that's not what the first two were like. But that's the kind of thing that I learned now that you can do in comics, that I think is but that's just craft.
Yeah, that takes me to the question that I always ask, that you just literally answered, which is, would you like to go back in time and rewrite that stuff because it's not the same person, or you like it to think, you know what, it should stay the way it is because I learned from doing it that way?
Yeah, I think it should stay the way it is. I think what I think about art, books, art, anything, right? They're never finished and they're never perfect, and they can always be improved upon. You can always do a better job with whatever work you've produced. It's just a document of where you were as an artist at that moment. Mm-hmm. And so I would never change what I did in the Plain Janes. It's a great book that I did me and Jim did in 2007. It's wonderful. Would I write it the same now? No, but I learned a lot from it. And it's a document of where I was as a writer, as a comic book person at that time. And so hopefully I keep growing and learning and doing better and cool things. I'm really excited about some of the things that I've just written on this project with Karen. Like, I think that they are stretching the way that I, have been thinking about things. And I actually did something in the Oracle story that me and Marguerite are doing, that I had started in like something like an idea that I got for this new project. And then Karen was like, wow, that's really cool. And I was like, yes, it is really cool. And so then I had, I put it in the Oracle story with Marguerite. So it's like, and I'm sure other people have already done it, and I'm not reinventing the wheel or anything, but for me, it was new. And for me, it was, sort of this exciting way of storytelling and, one little panel thing. So that's the gift, right? Is that, the more that you push yourself, the more that you learn. And if you have a great artist that you're working with, and you have the time and the luxury to really be able to collaborate in a joyful way, then it's golden,
And then it's the second part of it. Have you ever said to yourself, have an idea and said, no, I'm not ready, and put it on save it in a notebook or whatever, said, I'll come back to you, my dear, but this is not the time yet?
Oh, I have like 15 of them. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I have so many ideas for so many books, comics and novels and whatever else they might be. That I'd like to do. And I mean, actually I have a different project that's not announced yet. That is something that I'm terrified to write. And but I'm finally ready, and it's going to be a graphic novel. And I'm really excited about it, but I'm nervous, and I feel like that's a really good place to be, because it means that you're pushing yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm asking, because many times you stop yourself, say later, I'll do it later, but at the same time you need, as a writer, to say, you know what, stop procrastinating with this project. I gotta challenge myself and do it, right?
Yeah, I was actually talking about this with Cory Doctorow, who's a writer, a science fiction writer. He's a very dear friend of mine. I was on a hike, and I was talking about that. And I was talking about this project and about how scared I was, and how I just felt like I said to him, I was like, I feel like I've lost my voice. I feel like I have laryngitis. Like my dialogue isn't good. Like that I'm just really struggling. And he was like, oh, that's good. You're growing your skill set. Like it's like, you're kind of you're moving to that next level. He had this like sort of brilliant way of saying it that of course I can't mimic right now, because I'm not as brilliant as him, but it was really comforting to like know that like he wasn't like, oh, I don't think you can do it. He was just like, oh, it's like you're doing your first squats, or your first your first dance class or something, and like, you know, you're tripping over your feet, but doesn't mean that you're not going to get the steps. You'll get them, you know. So
It's just finding another way to make the story work, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's also about, I think as an artist, you don't want to just sing in the same voice all the time, and you have to be able to experiment, and in order to be able to like grow your toolkit, you have to take chances, and you know, uh, so yeah, I don't want to ever not take chances with stories, and I don't ever want to do the same thing um, over and over again. And maybe that's why like my books aren't like the biggest, most successful books in the world, but you know, I love all of them, and I work very hard at all of them. And even if they might be niche, I'm learning. I'm giving myself a challenge with each of those books. But you know, Female Furies is very different than Plain Jane's, is very different than Shade the Changing Girl, is very different than
Vertigo.
like they're like you wouldn't be like, oh, this is a Castellucci book, and I'm, you know, like it's not just one flavor of book. They're not just
Yeah.
one flavor, you know. So it's like each time you're reinventing the wheel, because this story isn't going to be for that person, and this story isn't going to be for that person, you know. So
Absolutely. And has this ever happened to you? You know, like you're in a graphic novel or comic, whatever, and you feel like, oh, I'm going in the right direction, and suddenly your characters start saying, nope, that's not me. That's not me. You're wrong. Change it, or I'm not going to let you finish it.
yes. Also, I have it happen where it's happening right now in this book with Karen. There's this one character who I thought was just throwaway. Who cares about this guy, right? Like whatever. And like I handed in the first part, and Karen was like, I didn't realize this character was like he's really great, like so important. I was like, yeah, I had no idea either. And all of a sudden he was like, hello, how you doing? I'm like, I'm going to be in this book and I'm important. And I was like, oh shit, I guess you are, you know? So yeah, that happens.
And how did you?
Sorry, my the sun is coming in now.
No, don't worry. And how do you deal with it when the characters start responding and saying, no, I'm not going to do that? How do you deal with it? Do you try to push them to say, hey, I am the writer, shut up? Or it's like, okay, you know, let's make a deal.
Sometimes you have to have a stern talking with them and be like, I hear you, I see you, but you can't be here. Like, for example, in like, you know, in like Batgirl, right? Like, it's like, look, you're right. That would be a great idea, but I can't do that. So we're going to have to like figure that out. But sometimes I think I think as a writer, as a creator, your brain is stitching together and making connections that you don't think of that are very important. And you have to trust that. And you have to trust that if a character is stepping forward into the spotlight, that it's giving you a gift of something that you might not know, you might not be aware of. And I think that if you're brave enough with your skill set, then you can go on that road. You know, if you're strong enough in the story that you're telling, it will enhance the story. Yeah. So I'm excited about this like new character that's bullied his way in, because he's the one who's giving me all these ideas that are super cool about how I can do something cool with time and space and comics and, you know, all that stuff. So I really look at it as a gift.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there is any limits to what you can tell in comics in terms of stories?
I don't think so. I think you can tell anything. I'm trying to think. No, I think you can tell anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, let's get rid of hate. How about not that? But you know,
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm. And in terms, I think that comics has a real advantage in terms of, again, we talked about time and space, but there's also another thing that comics have that other arts don't have, I think. that you can use in your advantage as a writer and as an artist, which is you can change the format at will.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think also the fact that that there's no rules to what you can do in a comic because comics that like that visual language or that dreamy space that happens like is part of the flow of the way that stories like that are told. So you can move easily, flashback here, there, whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, when you're writing, let's relate the things that I love the most. When people, let me explain. When people say comics and movies are related, I always say no. For me, what's related is comics. It could be two things: poetry and music.
Yeah,
Because
I
for
agree.
me, thank you. Because for me, comics it flows.
Yeah.
Like this. As I always said, the dune. We have the mountaintop, the dunes, etc. And so my question for you is comic storytelling a symphony, jazz, or rock and roll? Bye.
I think it depends. Do you have an answer for that? I'm going to say that I think it depends. It depends. It depends which style you want to tell your story in, right? Like I think that having been in a punk band when I was younger, I think that the collaborative aspects of comics is like writing a song, like writing a rock and roll song. But I think the collaboration, the way the work is made, is jazz because it's an improv between you and the artist. And I think the final product is a symphony because everything sort of comes together in a crescendo. So I think it's all of it.
I love the answer because when I talk to comics people who are also musicians, the answer is always it's all of them.
Yeah, it is all of them. Yeah.
Because it is. For me, you ask me about superhero comics, and I always say it's a lot of things. But first and foremost, for me, superhero comics are a symphony or opera.
Yeah.
Because they depend on the highs and lows. Highs and lows. It's all the time in 20 pages. You have to do that. But if you're talking about the collaboration, the collaboration is jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Because it looks improvised, but at the same time, it's the most complex thing there is.
Yeah, it's very structured. Yeah.
And of course, we're crazy, so it's rock and roll. And then if you ask a British creator, of course, they're always going to tell you it's punk. It's none of them. It's punk.
That's why I was like, it's punk. That's why I was like, I'm punk band. But I also write librettos for operas. So yeah. I mean, and that's why that I have the same relationship with the composer that I do with the artists in comics. It's definitely a collaboration. Yeah, comics are the best, basically.
Well, yeah. And when you're creating a story, doesn't matter if it's serialized, if it's creator owned, if it's licensed, etc. Where do you come from? And I mean, do you come from emotion or you come from a structure? What rules what you want to put in that pitch?
That's a hard question. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
No, it's just a hard question because I think everything is just intuitive. So it just sometimes it's the high concept. Like I have this sort of question that I want to answer artistically, and sometimes it's the character that sort of like is like I feel like this, and I have this song or story that I want to tell, and that I must tell, and so it comes from the character. So it really kind of depends. I can say the two graphic novels that I'm working on right now, both creator owned. One, it comes from emotion, and one comes from a sort of existential question. So they're both very different. But I'm a character girl, so so the characters are most important. I don't know everything. It's all of it.
It's all of it, yeah. But at the same time, if I had to ask you, you can only have one.
Oh gosh.
You can only have one. You can only have the structure. It's like I live on the structure and I have to survive because I need the structure to work, or the emotion? And
Oh, emotion.
you can only pick one.
There's no question. Emotion.
That I made that too easy with the kids.
French and Italian. It's emotion. It can't be any other way.
Yeah, well, you're talking
Exactly.
as Robert De Niro could say, "You talking to me?"
Exactly. You know what I'm talking about.
What do you think we should, as an industry, what do you think we are already changing, and or have already changed, and what's next? What do you think we need to change as an industry?
Well,
Your face just told me, where do I start?
yeah, there's a lot. Look, I write for, my first career, besides being in a punk band, is, writing young adult novels and writing for young people. And my comics career as well, in that sense. Um, so I think that the separation between kids comics, graphic novels, and monthly comics needs to be reconsidered, because right now I feel like they're too separate. And there are these books that we treat like books in the marketplace, and there are these books that we treat like comics.
Yeah,
I think that now that we've come to this place in our history, that needs to start to change, in some way. I don't think that they should be separated. I think that they should all be treated in a similar way. And I think that is changing, but I still see a difference in the way things are marketed and the way things are thought about. Um, and I think that needs to change.
absolutely.
I think that for me, as a female creator, who's been in the business for a long time, and it took me 12 years to get to write a superhero in universe, um, and I think this is happening as well, but I still think that there's miles and miles and miles and miles to go for diversity in comics.
Absolutely.
And for women in comics, I see that, men get to, do comics over and over and over again. And it seems like women or, BIPOC creators, get one chance, and then they, that's it. You did one once, so, that's it. So I think that needs to change as well. I think that, the people who are not white men need
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah. Let's say it as it is. That's like in movies, If you're a man, you can fail 20 times. If you're a woman, oh, you have your chance.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest difference for me is that I think that those men have very luckily been able to been brought along and cultivated and grow their craft, because they've been given chance after
Yeah.
chance after chance to be able to learn how, the ins and outs in that. And for women it's very different. And like I said, like a lot of times, that is changing. It's changing a little bit, very small amount, but that's something that, um, that I think needs to change more. And it is. It's not that it's not changing. I want to give a lot of props and credit to, to the companies that are, bringing that to the forefront. And I think that is happening, but it needs to happen more.
Yeah, it just needs to keep happening and more each time, And
Yeah.
in a way, let's say, as a father of a 6-year-old and a husband, I always say, I hate that it's so the growth is so progressive when it should be exponential. We need
Yeah.
we need to jump. We don't need to go that slow, because we're wasting time and we are losing readers.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like also it's like, I think that I'm glad, like, like Mariko is writing Batman now, and I think, that's incredible. I think, more women should be able to write men, because men have been writing women for forever, and they're still continuing to write women. And sometimes I really wish that gentlemen in comics you know, when they're offered a character that's a woman, I wish that they would say, you know what, am I the best person to write this right now? Like, maybe let me suggest these women. Like, here's a list of women that, you know, that I've done. I mean, I've done that before. You know, I was offered a character who was, you know, not a white woman character, and you know, I said no. You know, I said, but you know, here's a character, here's a maybe some writers that would be, you know, better suited than me. I don't know what they ended up doing. You know, it wasn't DC, it was, you know, somewhere else. But you know, I think that sort of, I wish that more creators would, you know, or gentlemen creators would think about that, and would think like, you know, because they're going to get another job. That's not the problem. They will get another job, but women might not get another job just because, you know, they did that one character that one time or whatever.
Absolutely. And there's also about the first part of your answer, as it's something that
I want to say the same thing for panels at comic book conventions. I wish that gentlemen would ask, are there women on this panel? You know, is everyone the same color? Like, you know, to make sure that panels at comic book conventions are also diverse, because I think that that's really important as well.
yeah, well, that's like, and as you know, I run conventions, not only in Spain, in Europe. I always get organizers to ask me, if you're going to have a women invited, they have to be in a panel about how it is to be a woman in comics. And I always tell them no, and they're like, why? Because they fucking hate it. And they're like, why do they hate it? Because they're human beings, they're creators. That's the point. You are separating them.
Now I say, if somebody says, oh, we're going to put you on a panel that's like women in comics, I say, no, I'm not going to do that panel. You know, put me on a craft panel, put me on a whatever panel, or rename your panel. You can have it be all women, but rename your panel to something else, you know?
No, not because that's faking it. I don't like it. I normally just send an email with a line that says, okay, can I have one that is how is to be a man in comics?
Yeah.
And the answer is like, why could you have that panel? And then I just answer back, you just answered your own question.
Yeah, I think TCAF did a panel that was like men in comics, and they had all women creators be on that panel, and it was like a legendary kind of thing. Anyway,
yeah, I was thinking that the first part of your answer, but I loved it because a lot of creators in Spain, in the US, in Europe in general, are telling me that for many years in comic we had a big gap, which is, you know, kids comics.
Yeah.
That thing that some editors say don't sell, and then I saw them Dogman or Raina Tegelmeier or any other thing and say they don't what? You have to give the audience what they want. That's the problem. If you don't give them what they want, they are not going to buy it. It's not a matter of kids don't read comics. You just have to give them what they want. And then they always tell me there's a gap there between the kids and then maybe young adult, and maybe comics always have that gap. And I say that you and a lot of other are working to cover that gap, which is what we need to not lose readers between kids comics and adult comics, right? Adult graphic novels.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. You know, I think middle grade comics are very robust, very, you know, very, there's a lot there right now. And, you know, and that's why I love like a book like Shade, because I think the other thing is that, and I write for young adults, but I feel like what you want to do when you're writing for young adults, especially in comics, is you want to write a book that feels like it's sort of like the thing that you find that nobody else knows about, because when you're a teenager, that's when you fall in love with your most favorite thing that changes your life, you know?
Yeah.
And I think Gerard and I had like big conversations about that with Young Animal and about Shade, was that I feel like, you know, Shade is the kind of book that a teenager is a little bit too old for a teenager, but it's the way that I felt, or you felt, or many people here felt when they were reading Vertigo for the first time.
Yes.
You know, it's a little bit too mature for you, but it's exactly the right age range. But the rules for what that is very different. You know what I mean? Like what you're allowed to do in young adult and what you're allowed to do in adult. And I think that young adult is actually that space where it's a little bit too mature for you, but and it's also for adults. It's like it really is a very strange kind of place. And I think the problem is that people don't know how to market that, because there are these age ranges of what's appropriate for someone under 18 or over 18, and so that's the difference.
But I guess that for you and the editors, it's gotta be in the end, as a writer, you have to feel when you write it. First, I'm not talking down to my readers. I'm respecting them. And second, I'm not patronizing them. They're teenagers. They hate that. I have to be careful with those limits, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, the best thing about kids or teenagers is that if they smell bullshit in your book, they'll just close it. They're not going to give it 50 pages and see how you do. They're just going to like shut the book and never read it again. So that's, that's a pretty, tough thing. Not tough thing for you, but it's just like they're a tough audience. They're not simple. They're not easy. And you can't talk down to them. I just write a story and I just because also it's like one 15-year-old is not the same as another 15-year-old. Some 15-year-olds are very young and naive and very sheltered and very fragile. Some 15-year-olds, are like kick-ass boss, amazing, adults, fully formed like 50-year-olds in their brain, so
that also depends on the gender. If they're male like me, 15 kids. If you're a woman, no, I'm sorry, a lot more mature. And I remember in my years in high school, looking around and talking around my friends and feeling, I'm sorry, I'm not saying I was mature. I just said I've always felt these women, these girls know what they're doing. Well, as men, we don't. We're just playing football and being idiots.
But even at 15, even with boys, even as immature as they are, there's still differences, right? Like and so it's like when I'm at a book festival and I'm tabling or whatever, and someone says, "Well, is this book appropriate for my kid?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know your kid. Maybe Year of the Beasts or Shade the Changing Girl is perfect for them. Maybe it's too much for them and they shouldn't read it until they're, I don't know your kid." So
maybe the dad in that case or a mom should tell you what the kid usually reads, right? So you have a frame of reference.
But it's not even that. When you're writing for kids, one of the most difficult things is that every single adult has a different idea about what is appropriate for children.
Oh.
So that's also the problem, right? So I could say, "Oh, yes, it's appropriate for 12-year-olds." And then I get an angry email from someone saying, "How dare you? How dare you write this book? How dare you say that this is for children? This is not for children," like Soupy Leaves Home, which is for 10 and up. How dare you? How dare you, write this book about, abuse and, hobos and, what it is to be a woman. How dare we don't teach our, okay, well, you think that's inappropriate, but another adult will not think it's inappropriate. So that's the real difficult thing when you're writing for young people is that nobody has the same idea about what it means to write for children and what a children's book means and what it is. And the age ranges, it doesn't even matter because a 10 to 12-year-old, one 10 to 12-year-old is very different in what than another one is. And so it's you just have to write the story and just automatically know someone's already mad at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like buying a car and 5 seconds later the value has dropped 70% because even if you didn't use it, it's bought. That's the same with teenagers bullshit detector. They have it installed in their brain. Even if on page 1 they're looking for the bullshit, even if they don't know it.
Yeah.
And on page 2 it's like, no, fuck, get it away.
Yep. Totally.
And do you consider when you're writing, do you consider or use different muscles? That would be the best way to ask. If it's going to be serialized or is it going to be a full graphic novel? Does that mean you use different muscles in your brain, or is the same one just used in a different way?
Yeah, it's definitely 100% different. I'll say that with the project that I'm doing with Karen, I imagined it as a serialized thing. I don't know if it's going to be serialized or if it's going to be if it's just going to automatically come out as one. So in my mind, I've always thought of it as serialized. So no matter what they do, that's not my problem. I'm writing it as sort of these, like a 5-issue kind of thing, to have chapters. But because I don't know how it's going to come out, it's kind of nice because I'm writing it all at once so that, I can like go back and fix things. I mean, that's the hard thing about a serialized thing, right? It's like once it's out the door, you're like, oh, I should have done this. You can't go back. You got to keep going forward. So yeah, I definitely think about how I construct the story differently when I'm doing a graphic, not a graphic novel, when I'm doing a longer piece than I'm doing a shorter, a serialized one. Yeah.
And do you think that serialized is going to disappear ever, or that is going always to be is always going to be there?
I really hope it doesn't disappear, because I do think that there's something really lovely about the fluidity and flexibility of a monthly serialized thing. As much as I just said, like, oh, sometimes you're like, damn, like I should have done this or that, like, I think that there is a beauty to the accidents that you accidentally put in there, the parameters that you have, the growth that you can do, the pivoting, like that you can change because you're like, oh, this character is doing this, or oh, maybe, or the audience is really responding to this, so now I can like add that is a good direction to, I don't know, whatever, like there's or you can course correct, like, oh, I fucked up and I was whatever sexist, in this thing, I should make a change, right? Like I messed up, and I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about any creator, right? That they can make an adjustment, so I hope it doesn't go away. I wonder if perhaps, I really like or I'm interested in the model that TKO is doing, where they have, you can buy it, as a graphic novel, or you can buy the individual ones as like a set. So, so that it becomes, or digitally, right?
Yeah.
As an art object, or I think that that's kind of interesting, because then I think you can engage in it in kind of any way. So I wonder if maybe that's a solution. But I do find myself more and more waiting for trades, because I like to binge the whole story. Like I like to get it in little chunks. So I feel torn because, I think that, and maybe that's why, like I said, I don't know how it's going to turn out with this project with Karen, but maybe that's why it's like I'm writing as though it's a serialized thing, because I do like that sort of, I do like that feel. There's a certain way that you can time jump in a serialized thing that you can't really do when you're doing. I mean, you can, but you can't.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I hope there's both.
Yeah, for me, it's when I get asked this question, I always answer the same way. It's like, do you want movies to disappear? Do you want TV shows to disappear? And they're like, why? Because that's what you're telling me about serialized comics and full-size volumes. Is pick one or the other. I don't want to pick. I love my serialized storytelling when I can come back every month and wait for it to be continued and say, oh my God, what's going to happen next week? Yeah. But I also want the stories, which are like movies, where I know beginning, middle, and end is going to happen in the same volume. Why can't I have both?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is that, like, I mean, except for Batgirl, which I didn't know how long it was going to go on, with Shade and and Female Fury, like I knew Female Furies was 6 issues, right? So I was thinking about, well, what's that going to look like collected, and so thinking about it as sort of, the whole. The same with Shade, the Changing Girl. Marley and I, when we did Shade the Changing Woman, it wasn't certain whether or not we would get to have 6 issues or 12 issues. And Marley and I had a conversation, and I said, we agreed. And I said, look, I want this story to have a satisfying end. And so if they can't tell us if we're going to have another 12 issues, let's just tell them we're done after 6.
Mm-hmm.
Like that way we can finish the story and we don't have to rush in any way, or we find out in issue 3 that we're not going to get another 6, or we find out, because then you can't, you don't have the time to be able to really craft your story. And so, so I think maybe that's the thing that I think people are starting to think like that, but that's the thing that, because, like when I watch a TV series, some series, they drop them all at once.
Yeah.
And I can watch the whole thing. Some I'll watch every week. Some I'll wait until it's all done and then I'll watch it. So I think that way of engaging with it is interesting, but I think that the best way, the way that could be most successful is if you're thinking about what the arc of that story is, so that it's not just willy-nilly and then we collect it, but that there's an intention behind it.
Yeah, that's always the same. When you think about that, what you just mentioned, that's made me think, Disney Plus, Apple, and HBO, at least classic HBO, I don't know what HBO Max is going to do, is, 1 episode per week, so it's serialized. And then you have Netflix and you have Prime, Amazon Prime, where they go, you binge it. That's the whole thing. And I think that is in comics, but tell me if you agree, please. What should change is not that it's serialized or not, is to think, and I think it's already happening, and I believe you agree with me. People is starting to realize some stories should be serialized, some shouldn't. It's like, even if it's superheroes, Black Label or something that Marvel does, something that they're saying, wait a minute, this shouldn't be serialized. This needs to be a volume.
Yeah.
And that's what it should change. The format for certain stories, some stories call for it. Some stories call for serialized, right?
Well, and that's what I was talking about with, like, the difference between the ways that young adult things are marketed, because they're usually, a volume, right? Like a story that's like a big chunk of, stuff. And so I think that's where there needs to be some more flexibility in that kind of thing with the adult stuff,
Absolutely, because if you think about it, young adult in manga is every week in Shonen Jump or similarly. So you can have it every week. You can have it every month. And every time I hear young adult has to be full volumes, I always say, no. It's what the story calls for. Some stories call a romance story you can tell in 8 pages, 20 pages, and come back next month to see how this relationship is going to evolve. And some other stories, I call for it to be complete in the same one, right?
I think it's just a matter of, just like what we were saying, is just like offering opportunities for the audience to engage with the work in the way that best suits the audience. If somebody wants it serialized, like that's why I was saying with TKO, I don't know if that's the best solution, but to me, it's like, that's a solution, because then you can get the way that you like to read comics can be there. And I think also like that it becomes then an art object, right? Like, because you've got your collectible version.
Yeah, one of them is the vinyl and the other one is the digital version, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But for you as a writer, if you have to write, I don't know if you're writing anything for TKO, and you mentioned the way you.
I'm not. I like to see a lot, and I'm fascinated by the way that they've sort of done this three different.
That's going to be my question now, because I think you already covered it in a way with what you're doing for Karen, but for you as a writer, would it be possible for you to write that way, saying, okay, it's serialized, but it's not serialized?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's what I'm doing with Karen. Honestly, I think that's what's going to happen with the thing with Karen. But yeah, I absolutely, but not the graphic novel. Yeah, the other book that I'm doing, that'll be like 300 pages, and I'm not thinking of that serialized at all. I'm thinking of that as a novel,
Yeah.
so it's different.
That's what I meant, how difficult it is to think about it both ways.
Yeah,
To think about it's going to be published in 5 issues, but also at the same time, the publisher is going to give you the option the same day to buy it as one volume. It's a completely different way of writing, right?
I always feel like a story tells you how it wants to be written, and then that's what you do. So, and for me, I don't even mean just like serialized or a longer novel, comic book novel, but does this story want to be a punk song? Does this story want to be a novel? Does it want to be a short story? Does it want to be an opera? Does it want to be a play? Does it want to be a performance piece? I don't know. I haven't written a play yet, but I will one day, I'm sure, because one day a story will come to me and be like, hey, guess what? I'm a play, So, so I think it's the job of the writer to listen to how the story wants to be best told, because some ideas that I have, like this idea that I'm doing with Karen, sure, I guess it could make a good novel, but it wanted to be a comic book. It's best suited. The best way to tell that story is a comic book. And how lucky am I that I'm like, okay, let's do it as a comic, So I think you have to listen to what medium is best to tell the story.
And does it ever change? I mean, you start something, oh, this is going to be a comic, and during the process, you suddenly realize, oh, no, this is not a comic.
Have I had that happen? Well, no. But there was one book. I did this YA novel series, a sci-fi novel series. I did book. It wanted to be 2 books, a duology, right? But I felt like I wasn't done with the world. But I didn't want to write it didn't feel like a book. So actually, my brother and I wrote a one-shot role-playing game that takes place between book 1 and between book 2, that you could play. And that kind of like, that's what it was like, because it wasn't a story, and it wasn't like a book, but it wasn't a short story, and it wasn't a novel. And so, but I was like, the world was calling to me. So I was like, why don't I just do this? So, and I'd never done a game like that, So yeah, I think sometimes things do change, the way that they want to be.
And I have to ask about this, because if not, people is going to kill me. I have to ask about Star Wars, of course.
Oh yeah, of course.
So we were talking about playing in somebody else's sandbox as compared to play with your own, with Marvel, with DC, etc. How is it to play in that Star Wars sandbox in terms of, I'm not even talking about the freedom, but in terms of yourself as a writer thinking, okay, this is the tone, this is where I have to go, this is a Star Wars, and this isn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard. For me, I was more worried about my younger self getting mad at me for messing up Princess Leia, But Star Wars, especially when I was writing it, it was very strict, because it was right before The Force Awakens even came out. Yeah. So nobody knew what was going to happen. It was very secretive. I didn't even know some of the things in my own book, there were blank spots and, things I wasn't allowed to know. And, it was very difficult. But it was thrilling. And what I really tried to do was I tried to think about Princess Leia. So my book takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I really felt like that was a moment where Princess Leia is really struggling between her heart and her duty to the rebellion. And, because Han is in carbonite, she loves him, and she just lost her planet. And Luke got his hand chopped off, and she has this rebellion that she's in charge of. But she also has this heart that she feels. And so I just tried to concentrate on that, and anything that didn't serve that, her struggle between heart and duty, was out, because I really felt like that's like that the story Moving Target was about her sort of figuring out that you can't do your duty if you don't honor your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, and I think that's what Princess Leia's core character is. So I just kind of tried to keep with that.
Mm-hmm. And we are 2 minutes away from being 2 hours. So
Okay, great.
I think you need to go back to your life.
This was such a lovely conversation. It didn't feel like 2 hours. It felt like 10 minutes.
Thank you. So last one, and I let you go. What's your path? Your path now. Your path is, I'm going to do my own thing for now on, and that's it. I'm going to be doing both. I don't know, and I let my path guide me as a hippie. What?
I would like my dream, I think, because I do like doing is that what you mean, like creator owned or licensed? I do like doing licensed characters. I love doing, rebooting, reinventing, cracking, characters in a different way, like, female Furies and Shade. And I get to do something like that actually in Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer thing. I have a one shot coming out with Black Hammer Visions that I'm very excited about. And so I think that the path for me, my dream, would be to do like maybe a third or a quarter of my work be licensed,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of it be creator owned. That's my path, I think.
So they each, you have to scratch every year. Is that going to be a 1/3? I have an itch to do, so I'll do that every year. But most of it is going to,
my superhero.
Most of it has to be your own stuff, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think that's sort of been traditionally what I've done.
Yep.
Last year I had a Girl on Film that came out on Boom, which was the memoir, and Plain Janes plus Batgirl and Frozen. So yeah, those were the two things. But I do like playing in other people's playgrounds, but it's like it enhances like my own work, and I think I'd like to, and I think other creators are like that too. I mean, I feel like every guy I know is like that. Like they do some superhero stuff, and then they have their creator own stuff. So
yeah, even the ones that say, no, I will never go back to playing somebody else's sandbox. I only like my own. A couple of years later, they do it, and you're like, so? And they're like, yeah, you know what? That itch, I need to scratch it. I didn't realize I needed to scratch it, so I have to go back.
Yeah, there's something fun. I mean, I would like to say, look, I love working for DC. I've never worked for Marvel. I'd love to work for Marvel sometime,
Marvel people.
Yeah, who knows?
Let's make it happen. We have Lauren Beeson here last week. She's taking care of all the young adult and all that with Scholastic and Marvel. Maybe she or maybe CD or somebody else. Guys, make it happen.
So I'd like to expand, but I really do like doing the sort of outside of the the norm. I loved doing Batgirl, but that's a different kind of. I think the itch that I'd like to scratch would be the more sort of weird, sort of out of continuity stuff.
Yeah.
The rebooting, reinventing. I think that's
going crazy. You can say just going crazy.
Yeah, going crazy. Yeah.
Anyway, so we should. Yeah, no, that's you should start. Please don't cut, because I want to say proper thank you to you after we're off the camera. But for everybody else, thank you, CECIL. That was amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone who tuned in.
And to all of you, thank you so much for being here. And tomorrow, mañana, in Spanish, with a Spanish creator, con la creadora española Julia Vicente. See you tomorrow. Nos vemos mañana. And we're off in 3,